Hey there, viewers. Judges are trained to stay composed, no matter what they see. But today, that composure shattered. As Diddy's secret footage was played in court, the judge's reaction stunned everyone. Standing up abruptly and throwing up right there in the courtroom. Whatever was on that screen, it crossed a line. Let's get into it. The room without light. I've worked the guts of this courthouse for 17 years. And I've never once seen Courtroom 3B used. It's not on the daily schedules. No attorneys ever request it. No interns go near it. If you asked half the judges upstairs, they'd probably say it doesn't even exist anymore. Hell, I'd started to believe that myself. My name's Ramona. I handle building systems, plumbing, electrical, and AV. When something breaks, they call me. When something weird shows up, they still call me, just quieter. Most days it's a busted light panel or a stubborn mic. But 2 nights ago, just before close, I got a sealed work order labeled Fed 3B Access. No initials, no return signature. Just instructions. Reconnect secure AV lines, do not power on. Clearance level 2. Now, I've been doing this job a long time. I know when something's more than it looks. The ticket came through our internal terminal, but the routing number had a flag I'd never seen, an underscore code. That's usually reserved for sessions involving federal detainees under protective review. I've only heard about that kind of thing secondhand. But this wasn't hearsay. This was a keycard swipe and a walk down into the sublevel, where the walls start to sweat. Courtroom 3B is down a half slight lower than anything else. It doesn't have signage, the floor tile's different, the air smells like a basement water heater. I carried my tool bag and flashlight, thinking I'd find an old unit fried from years of disuse, but when I unlocked the door, the light flickered on automatically. Clean, fresh, everything in place. The bench chairs had been moved, rearranged slightly. All but one was pushed back, and right in the middle of the room, where no judge ever sits, someone had installed a velvet armchair. Burgundy. Deep cushion. The legs were gold and not fake-plated either. That thing didn't belong in any government building I'd ever set foot in. I stood there, trying to wrap my head around what I was seeing. It wasn't dusty. The seat looked like it had been used recently, like someone had only just stood up. Right below it, a faint mark in the linoleum. Not quite blood, not quite oil, but something darker than either. I got to work, keeping my head down. That's what I do. I checked the wall input panel. The AV lines were old but intact. The main unit had a tamper seal on it, dated 5 years back. I tried my master override code. It rejected it. Red light. No beep. Just quiet refusal. That's when I knew something was off. 5 years is a long time to keep a courtroom sealed, especially one that technically shouldn't be running equipment that old. I went to grab the universal bypass when the door opened behind me. I didn't hear footsteps. She just appeared. Tall woman, no badge, wearing a black overcoat. No greeting, no ID. She set a small USB stick on the judge's bench and slid it toward me. Install playback interface. Leave immediately, she said. No emotion, just business. I asked, who signed off on the access? She didn't answer, just repeated the same line, like she'd rehearsed it. The USB stick was matte black, no branding, just one thing on the side in silver ink. Unfiled, Excited 6A. I didn't dare plug it in, not yet. I slid it into my bag while pretending to check my wiring. He left without saying another word. The door didn't even close all the way, just a soft latch, as if even the hallway outside didn't want to hear what was happening inside. I wiped down the AV monitor and screen, prepping it for external feed. As I did, it flickered. Once. Just long enough to see static turn into something else. A single frozen frame, half a second long. Enough to burn into my memory and refuse to leave. The image was dim, the room lit red, like the kind of light you use in dark rooms or nightmare hotels. A figure was kneeling in the middle, their hands behind their back. Couldn't tell if they were tied or just still. The mirrored wall behind them caught the image at an angle, doubling the whole thing. But it was the silence that followed that shook me worse than any frame could. System shut back down as if embarrassed. I locked everything. No sign-in, no logs. That's what the orders said. I left the velvet chair alone. Didn't touch it, but the smell stuck to me the rest of the night. Kind of like perfume left in an empty room. I went home, cracked a beer, and sat on the couch without turning on the TV. Just thinking. Thinking about what kind of court hearing needs to be held in a room no one talks about. What kind of evidence needs 5 years of quiet and a seat not for a judge, but for someone else entirely. Around 11 p.m., I picked up the phone and called my brother. He used to be a marshal before he retired. Never talks about what he saw. I didn't give him the details, just told him I saw something strange and I had a question. What happens, I asked him, when a courtroom's too small for the evidence it has to hold? He didn't laugh. Didn't ask why I was asking. Just said, real calm, then they build the room around the silence, not the facts. Didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that room, the red, the velvet, the mirror showing something that hadn't moved, but had definitely seen me. The next morning, I went in like normal. Everything above ground was buzzing with the usual mess. Bailiff coffee, clerk chatter. Some kid lost a file and blamed IT. I kept my mouth shut, didn't mention anything. But when I logged into our maintenance terminal to file a basic service completion note, something caught my eye. A draft email had been created in our internal system. Not by me, not by any tech on shift. The message had no to field, no sender listed, just a title. Mere exhibit, not for jury. I opened it. It was empty. No body text, no metadata. And here's the thing. The timestamp said it was created at 3:03 a.m., hours after I left. No one's badge had accessed the building since then. I deleted it without saving. Then I emptied the recycle queue and powered the system down, just to be safe. But I kept thinking about that velvet chair. Still down there. Waiting. Wasn't for a judge, it wasn't even for a witness. It looked like the kind of seat someone might sit in if they wanted to be seen but not heard. A throne for the kind of silence that speaks back. And somewhere deep in my gut, I knew I hadn't just wired up a playback system. I'd opened a door, one they never really wanted shut, just forgotten. Chapter 2. He asked us not to call him father. They gave me the docket just past 7:15 that morning. It wasn't on the calendar, wasn't even in the sealed folder drop. A courier brought it in by hand. No badge, no name, no small talk. Just a sealed leather envelope with a black band wrapped tight around it. Inside, the case tag read, Combs, SS Section 18, Admissibility Review. No assigned judge, no courtroom number. Just a list of protocols I've only heard mentioned in training videos no one thought we'd ever use. In-camera session, non-public, no jury, no transcription. Clearance via mirror panel only. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I've been a federal clerk for 6 years. I've handled trafficking indictments, racketeering sheets, even one particularly ugly case involving military contractors overseas. But this was different. There was no indictment sheet in the packet, just a single handwritten note from the presiding judge, scrawled in blue ink. Emotionally destabilizing. Do not proceed unless medically cleared. I sat with that sentence for a long while, because judges don't write things like that, not even when they should. By 8 o'clock IEM, the courtroom was sealed. Jurors were formally excused with a cover notice citing unavailability of evidence, which made no sense. Courtroom 3B had been reactivated overnight. Nobody said it aloud, but I could tell the officers knew. They moved differently in the hallway, softer, slower, like the space itself had started to pulse. At 8:40 sharp, the substitute panel arrived. 12 people, but not jurors, not really. These were what the file called mirror panelists, a rare psychological clearance board used only in cases where the material itself might alter perception. Their job wasn't to determine guilt, it was to determine whether the footage we were about to play should be seen at all. One of them I recognized from a mental health board hearing last year. She was listed as a trauma specialist, but her file was sealed. Another was tall, sun-worn, barely spoke. Later, I'd find out he worked with The Hague on war crimes footage validation. He'd seen things most people aren't meant to survive seeing, and even he looked uneasy. No one used names. We used initials, and even those were whispered. The docket sheet had been trimmed to first letters only. No job titles, no bios, just roles. Diddy was already present when I entered the courtroom. He didn't say anything. His eyes weren't focused. He sat cuffed to the bolted chair in the middle of the room. Usually he came in with a kind of smug detachment, shoulders cocked like he still owned the air. But today, he was quieter, limper, like someone had drained the posture out of him. One of the bailiffs leaned over to me just before proceedings began and whispered, "He hasn't blinked in 7 minutes. You count that?" I didn't answer, but I had noticed. His stare wasn't directed at anyone, not even the mirror panel. It was aimed slightly off-center, toward the velvet chair across the room. Still there, untouched from the night before. I kept my clipboard steady, but my hands weren't. I watched as the psychiatrist on our rotation approached him with the basic medical questions. "Are you responsive today, Mr. Combs? Are you aware of your location?" The usual check-in script. He didn't flinch. But then, just as they secured the ankle cuffs and attached the biometric monitor, he spoke. Low, flat. I told them not to call me father. No one moved. The courtroom didn't even seem to breathe for a moment. He didn't repeat it, didn't elaborate, just stared back into that empty velvet seat like it owed him something. At 9:02, a federal officer entered the room with a secondary escort, a witness. Not scheduled, not listed. He couldn't have been older than 20, but his face had lines most men don't wear until 60. He had this hollowed look, cheeks pale, eyes sunken, knuckles red. He was wearing gloves, even though the courtroom was already uncomfortably warm. They sat him in the holding bench, to the side. No press, no jury, no observers. Just us. One of the legal aides asked if he wanted a lawyer present. He shook his head and said something I'll never forget. "No, they'll only lie." It wasn't defiance. It was certainty, like he'd already been through this loop before and he knew how it ended. We didn't question it. The order had been clear. His presence was to be noted, not interrogated. He was just there to observe. Though observe what? I wasn't sure yet. At 9:11, the AV tech entered. Same one who'd been in the room yesterday. She didn't speak, just nodded toward me and started hooking up the playback equipment. Her hands moved quickly, efficiently. But I noticed her fingers trembled when she slid the USB stick into the sealed port. The monitor came alive with a single static flicker. No sound, just a hiss of white noise before the screen settled into a loading icon. She paused, looked at the timestamp on the file. 12:44, on June 6, 2016, Room Z. I saw her jaw tighten. The judge, seated just behind the monitor, inhaled sharply. Not a gasp, just one of those subtle reflexes people make when their brain catches up with a memory they were hoping had died. That date, I remembered it, faintly. It had come up once in a sealed report, a case involving Combs and a sealed domestic complaint, the one where the alleged footage had never surfaced, dismissed on grounds of insufficient evidence. That was the lie, we all knew it, but now it was back, with a room name, Room Z. Not A, B, or C like the old recording studios he used. Z, like the end, like a place beyond everything else. The air in the courtroom thickened. I looked over at the judge again. His hand trembled slightly as it reached for the water glass. The tremble stopped when he realized the glass was already full. He hadn't touched it yet. In the holding bench, the young man with the gloves never blinked, never shifted. His eyes stayed locked on the screen, even though nothing had started playing. Diddy was still watching the chair. Like the footage didn't matter. Like the seat itself held the verdict. I kept one hand on my clipboard, the other near my lapel mic, though I knew full well no one was listening. Not today. They didn't want records. They wanted impact. And the playback hadn't even begun. Exhibit 6A. It began without warning, just a sharp hiss across the speakers like a deep exhale through old vents, and then silence. No title card, no audio bed, no warning advisory, no courtroom procedural, just black and white grain, flickering as if the file had been transferred through too many hands, or maybe through none at all. The AV tech didn't say a word. No one did. There wasn't even a prompt from the judge. The screen simply switched, and the air turned heavy. The first image was a wide shot, a room, rectangular, walls layered in padded velvet deep enough to look like fabric waves frozen in place. The color didn't register fully. The recording was monochrome, but the contrast hinted at red, thick and low saturation, like the last lights left on after the club empties out. In the middle of the room sat a leather couch, too large for comfort, positioned almost awkwardly, not facing the mirror but angled toward it, like it was meant for performance, not relaxation. On the far wall, centered perfectly, was a mirror. It took up most of the space, reaching from the floor almost to the ceiling. But there was something wrong with the reflection. It wasn't aligned. The room it mirrored seemed slightly off, deeper than it should be, shadows longer, the couch seemingly pushed further back. Like the mirror wasn't reflecting the room, like it was reflecting a version of the room. One click sideways from reality, and then a figure entered frame. He wasn't dressed in anything formal, no courtroom suit, no luxury brand markings, just a long sleeveless shirt and sweat-duckened pants, bare feet. He walked slowly, like he was listening for cues we couldn't hear. Behind him came two more figures, one of them male, dressed plainly in white, looking straight ahead, the other masked, gender unclear, head covered with something like a latex hood, the eyes just two hollow oval. They walked in sync, almost choreographed. The leather couch was their destination. The footage had no audio, but it didn't matter. The body language was louder than sound. Diddy sat first, placing himself directly in front of the mirror. He didn't look at it. He looked at the masked one, then pointed to a small metallic tray we hadn't seen before, sitting on the armrest of the couch. The masked figure picked it up. There was something in it, a bottle, small, opaque. They uncapped it. The other unmasked person began to remove their own shirt, revealing a torso marked with faint welts. No expression, no flinching, just obedience. Diddy extended his hand, palm up. The masked one poured something into his hand, thick, viscous, hard to read in grayscale. He smeared it on the torso in long, slow streaks. From neck to stomach, he didn't rush. He didn't speak, not that we could hear anyway, but even without audio it was clear he was giving directions. He motioned again. The masked one applied more. Then the screen stuttered. Just for a moment. A frame skip. The whole image jolted a half-inch upward. The couch twitched on screen. Diddy's hand moved too fast, like a second was missing. The visual distortion was sharp but short-lived. When it cleared, the masked figure was now kneeling on the floor, head bowed. The standing participant was no longer reacting to the oil. Their posture had changed. Not stiff, not limp, something else. And then, something truly strange. The mirror pulsed. It was so quick, so subtle, that half the room likely didn't catch it. But the reflection in the mirror for 2, maybe 3 frames no longer matched the footage. Diddy's reflection was gone. The others were still there, but in the mirror he wasn't present. Another skip. Then darkness. The lights dimmed in the footage, almost as if the room's electricity had been rerouted. Then the brightness surged again, this time more harshly, blowing out the whites. We could see nothing for a moment but ghost silhouettes, saturated into halos. And then it came. A whisper, barely audible. A child's voice, off-screen, fragile, high-pitched but steady, not panicked, not scared. Said I should just watch, so I did. There was no visual source, no figure in frame who matched the voice. The camera didn't pan, but the mirror caught it again. That flicker, and for a flash a small figure could be seen in the reflection, crouched behind a vent grate near the ceiling. Watch. In the real-time courtroom, someone moved. A court officer sitting 3 rows back rose silently. No one acknowledged him. He didn't raise a hand, didn't ask for recess. He simply stood and exited through the side door, his footsteps swallowed by the carpet. The video pressed on. The masked figure now stood behind Diddy, motionless. The tray was on the floor, tipped. The bottle rolled slightly. The unmasked participant had left frame. The camera panned slightly, now mechanical, not handheld. It focused on Diddy, whose eyes met the mirror for the first time in the entire footage. He smiled. It was a small smile, but it wasn't pleased. It was knowing, rehearsed, cold. That's when the trauma specialist lost it. She'd been holding composure the whole time. No reaction, eyes fixed, clinical. But at that moment, something broke. She covered her mouth with both hands and wept openly. Not loud, just raw. That shaking breath of someone who's seen too many wars and still wasn't prepared for this. And the judge, whose name I won't say, gripped the sides of his bench like it was the only stable thing in the world. His knuckles turned pale, his eyes didn't blink. And then, without warning, he lurched forward, knocked over his water glass, and vomited into the stainless steel waste bin beneath his desk. Dry, violent, heaving. Still, the footage continued. Still, Diddy sat on the screen, watching himself in the mirror, unmoved. It was in that moment, the purest, stillest moment of desecrated silence, that the real Diddy, the one seated in courtroom 3B, finally spoke. His voice wasn't raised, not a shout, not a scream, just a single sentence, spoken low and measured. You were never supposed to look. Everyone froze. It wasn't clear who he was talking to, the judge, the mirror panel, the screen, himself, or maybe that boy in the reflection. But the footage didn't stop. He continued for another 20 seconds, the camera slowly zooming in on the mirror. There were no figures left in frame, no bodies, just the red-lit couch. The reflection grew larger. And then, the final frame, frozen, the mirror steamed over. And there, just barely visible, were 3 words, etched with a trembling fingertip. We rehearsed this. The footage ended. The screen went black. Nobody moved. Nobody clapped for the AV tech. No one spoke. No request for sidebar, no note-taking. Only one quiet sound broke through the silence. The young man with the gloves, seated in the holding bench, let out a slow, shallow breath. It was the sound of someone confirming something they had prayed was untrue. Chapter 4. The drive was never meant to be found. It was nearly midnight when the box arrived. No label, no courier badge. Just a knock at the reinforced glass of the evidence intake desk, and a man in a gray overcoat holding a sealed courier crate the size of a legal binder. He didn't speak. Didn't wait for me to buzz him in, just set it down, nodded once, and turned without another word. The security camera at the gate caught nothing. Just a flicker, like static, ate the footage before it could burn itself into the drive. I'm not usually the one who logs high-sensitivity materials. I manage archive routing at the Federal Evidence Depot, a dull, windowless place buried 3 floors below the Records Division. I deal in labeled plastic sleeves and redundant verification logs. Digital forensics comes later, handled by a separate team, but that night they made an exception. The order came through with a classification I hadn't seen before. Mirror 18, Internal Integrity Review, no AI audit. Which was odd in itself. Every serious file goes through AI verification now. Facial match, timestamped cross-index activity analysis. But this one was flagged not to. Manual review only. And only I was cleared. The crate was heavier than it looked. Inside was a foam insert, cold to the touch and embedded in the center. A matte black USB drive, no brand. No ports beyond a standard A plug. A single word etched in metal at the base. Exhibit 6A. There was no chain of custody sheet, no file tag, no handler's signature. Every item that enters the vault is supposed to have a minimum of 3 pieces of traceable data. This had none. The transfer form was already signed. Not by me. It had my employee ID, my timestamp, even my handwriting on the electronic log, but I hadn't touched a thing yet. I held the drive in my hand for maybe a minute too long. Not because I was afraid. Not exactly. It was heavier than a thumb drive should be. Weighted wrong. Cold, like it had been kept in metal. The directive said no digital copy was to be made. Only a sealed duplication backup for physical containment, marked and stored in B7 cold storage, the subvault usually reserved for foreign espionage leaks, satellite uplink crashes, and failed biometric chip trials, not domestic criminal evidence. Still, I followed the order. I inserted the USB into the air-gapped duplication unit. The screen went black for a full 10 seconds before it even acknowledged the file. When it did, the name of the folder wasn't Exhibit 6A. It was something else. A single character string. Z. Just that. Z. I opened the file tree, no extensions, no titles, just a single block of black. I checked the properties, over 3 terabytes, which didn't make sense. The USB was supposed to be 64 gigs, max. I opened a data view window to examine the raw hexadecimal flow, and that's when I saw it. In the shadow frames, the parts that shouldn't have any image data, the metadata flickered. Not timing data, not color mapping. Names, encoded in binary, each string a block, names, initials, some I recognized. One of them had testified in a sealed civil case from 2018, case dismissed within a week. Another was the plaintiff in a non-disclosed workplace harassment settlement from 2020. The case was expunged after a mediation meeting that was closed to public record. There were dozens, possibly more, all faint, like they were being smuggled through the footage itself, hidden in the digital shadows between the visible frames, not meant to be read, but meant to exist. Just enough to prove they were real, just enough to haunt. I should have stopped right there. Should have completed the duplication and filed the unit in cold vault B7 like I was told, but something about the way the names lingered, how they felt like confessions without breath. It got to me. I opened the auxiliary drive slot, pulled out an old blank disk I kept for redundancy tests, burned the footage to it manually. No encryption, no indexing, just raw footage locked inside a simple AVI format. When the burn finished, I took the disk, slid it into an old foreclosure file from 2007, a defunct storage folder for a property seizure from a case that never went to court, and placed it inside a forgotten archive drawer under Housing and Urban. No one checks there. They never do. Before I closed the drawer, I wrote a note, small, yellow, sticky, in case the mirror cracks again, and I left. I figured that was the end of it. I figured wrong. That night, I was eating in my apartment. Cheap takeout, lights off, just me and the sound of the refrigerator making its usual rattling moan. My phone buzzed once. No ringtone, just a silent vibration across the table. I picked it up. No caller ID, no number, just a message. We saw you file the copy. Now look at yours. I froze. The phone buzzed again. This time, not a message, a photo. At first, it looked like a shot from the courtroom, the red-lit room, the mirror, but the resolution was wrong. The angle was higher than any of the playback camera positions I'd seen, and in the reflection, it was me, not just my face. The whole frame showed me seated at the duplication console, eyes wide, hand on the mouse, exactly as I'd looked earlier that night. But I had been alone. No one else had access to the duplication room, not even cameras. By protocol, the air-gapped unit is isolated, no remote viewing, no uplink. And yet, the image was there. My reflection, inside the red-lit room, staring back at myself. I didn't sleep. Haven't since. There's something wrong with that drive, not just what it shows, but what it remembers. It wasn't meant to be archived. It wasn't even meant to be found. It was meant to be watched. Just once. By the wrong person. Chapter 5. The room still exists. The address came through a red file folder. A real one, not digital. Hand-delivered by a courier in plain clothes who didn't stay long enough for a signature. It listed a property that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. The name had changed. The company that owned it had been dissolved 5 years earlier. But the coordinates were clear. She drove alone. They didn't want a team on this. No lab techs, no forensic cart, no PR observers. Just one person with full clearance and quiet judgment. They didn't even want me to wear a wire, just to go, look, and report, but only verbally, nothing in writing. The building was still there. Somewhere between forgotten and erased, it sat slouched between a welding supply shop and a shuttered daycare center, its windows boarded up with a lazy kind of finality. The sign above the entrance had faded to a pale smudge. The new tenant listed on the mailbox was an LLC no one at the bureau had ever heard of. I circled the block twice before getting out. The gate creaked. The outer lock was rusted over but not engaged. Someone wanted it to look abandoned, but not actually be sealed. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew I was walking into something that hadn't been touched officially in years, but hadn't been forgotten. The air was dense and still. Dust layered everything like old breath. But the wiring was intact. The lights worked. Not all of them, but enough to illuminate the hallway that led to what must have once been the studio floor. The red room wasn't hidden. It was right where it had been in the footage. Third door down the main corridor. Soundproofed from the outside with heavy insulation foam pressed beneath warped metal. No door plate. Just a blank handle, cold to the touch. I opened it slow. The velvet hit first, the smell of it. Thick, musty, sour like aged perfume sealed inside a forgotten drawer. The walls were exactly as they'd been on screen, textured in that same plush material. The color had faded in spots, but the effect was unmistakable. The couch was gone, but the mirror remained, mounted across the far wall, just as large, just as invasive, and cracked now. A tiny fissure in the upper right corner, almost artistic, like someone had etched a lightning bolt into its surface with the gentlest pressure. I approached it, slow, and stared. My reflection blinked back at me, but only once. I moved toward the floor beneath the mirror, and that's when I saw the debris. A dismantled camera rig casing busted, wires torn. A few scorched lenses scattered nearby. One of them melted slightly around the edges like it had been exposed to sudden, unnatural heat. And near it a torn strip of laminated label, faded text printed across the shred, barely legible. Freak said session. I paused. That line hadn't been part of the official documentation. There had never been mention of sets, only rumors. But here it was, labeled, filed like it was part of some grotesque schedule. I opened the drawer in the small corner desk. The handle groaned under the strain, but it moved. Inside were loose papers, not office memos, not invoices, but handwritten journal entries. No names, only numbers. Each page had a different hand, some in print, some cursive, some shaking and unsure, all anonymous. I scanned one page in the middle. The ink had bled from moisture. It read, "He told me to sing after, that way it would sound like art." I flipped another. We were given numbers. Mine changed every month. I was never allowed to memorize it. And another. I never said no out loud, I just learned how to disappear without moving. These weren't logs. They were confessions. I took a photo of the pages, despite the instruction not to. I knew they'd tell me later to delete it. Maybe they'd even wipe my phone remotely. But some things need to be seen twice to be believed. I crouched down by the wall where the velvet met the floor. The padding had worn away near the baseboard, revealing thick strands of red insulation. Not the typical foam you find in soundproof rooms. This looked denser, synthetics, and something else. It was warm, despite the cold room. Too warm. I stood and turned to face the mirror again. It was fogging. I stepped back instinctively, even though there was no heat source. My breath didn't cause it. The air was cold, yes, but not humid. And yet, the mirror began to cloud. From the center outward, soft plumes of condensation formed in slow spirals. And then, just like that, words began to appear. Not written with the finger. They emerged as though pushed through the glass from behind. Perfect, even letters, trembling like they were being written by memory. The trial begins. I froze. There was no one behind the mirror. No heat panel. No reverse lighting. I moved toward it, pressing my palm to the surface. It was freezing cold, but the words didn't vanish. They just lingered, soft and perfect. I didn't speak. Didn't move for what felt like an hour. Eventually, the letters faded, dissolving back into the pristine surface of the mirror. I knew I shouldn't have come alone, but I also knew they sent me alone on purpose. Because someone had to see it with their own eyes to confirm it wasn't just playback, that it wasn't just digital. The room wasn't just real. It was active, and whatever had happened there hadn't ended. It was waiting. Chapter 6. He's not responding anymore. They called me at 4:27 in the morning. Not unusual. Psychiatric crises in federal detention don't keep office hours, but the voice on the other end was steady in a way that told me this wasn't a normal call. No panic, no urgency, just a kind of solemn resignation. He's not eating, not sleeping, not speaking. But he's awake, the agent said. We need a threat assessment, to others, not himself. That phrasing always stuck out to me, to others. They never cared if he was a danger to himself. The facility was MDC Brooklyn, same as always. But this time, the gate to the special housing unit didn't just require my clearance. I had to sign a triple verification form and walk through a retinal scanner that had been turned off for 2 years. Until now. They walked me down without speaking, 2 guards in silence. The kind of silence that wasn't born from discipline, but superstition. I could feel it in the way they didn't look at the cell as we approached it. Cell 18A, inmate number 37,450 to 54. He was sitting upright on the cot, not restrained, not sedated, just still, eyes open, not blinking much. His lips were closed tight, but not pressed in anger or resistance. Just closed like they'd forgotten how to open. His hands were in motion. Small, slow movements, not twitching, not nervous energy, deliberate. I stepped closer to the glass and watched carefully. His index finger moved through the air, trailing invisible lines, left to right, down, then a curve, again, left to right, down, curve. It wasn't random. He was writing. I stepped inside. The guards didn't follow. They wouldn't. They just slid the key across the floor and shut the door behind me. "Mr. Combs?" I said. No response. He kept writing. It took me a moment, but I started to recognize the shape. He was tracing a room. 4 walls, one large shape, rectangular, that looked like a couch or a platform. Then, a larger rectangle, spanning the far wall, the mirror. I handed him a sheet of paper. He didn't hesitate, took it from my hand and began drawing with precision. No sketching, no revisions, just fluid, controlled lines, as if he'd memorized the space through repetition. Or obsession. He mapped out the entire red room, every camera angle, every light source, even the crack in the mirror. I stopped him after he began to draw figures, not full forms, just silhouettes in kneeling posture. When I asked him what they were, he finally looked up. His eyes met mine, and I swear they looked like they'd been drained of something vital. Not tears, not sleep. "Reading," he whispered. "They rehearsed it." "Who did?" He didn't answer. I took the drawing, folded it, and placed it in my case. I was instructed not to analyze, just assess threat, but I couldn't help myself. I pulled his psych file from our secure tablet. The logs from 2022 stood out. The prisoner claims to have seen the trial already. Repeatedly states they will only watch, then they'll forget. The note was buried at the bottom of a medical report labeled as an unrelated incident. Mild dehydration, auditory hallucination, check. But the phrasing was the same, almost word for word. "Mr. Combs," I asked quietly, "how did you see the room before the trial?" He smiled faintly, first movement I'd seen from him that resembled emotion. "I didn't see it," he said. "It saw me." I requested an X-ray later that afternoon after noticing discoloration near his right hip, a faint swelling, slightly unnatural posture when he sat. The scan came back 30 minutes later. There was something inside him. A foreign object, small, flat, jagged. They performed a controlled extraction. He didn't flinch once. No painkillers, no reaction. What they pulled out was a mirror shard, roughly 2 inches long, angled on one end like it had been broken off a corner. When we scanned it for prints, it had only one. It didn't match his. It didn't match any personnel. But the print matched a sealed witness file, a minor, deceased in 2017, listed as a no-contact loss from a sealed civil suit. There was no way that shard should have been in his body. There was no way he should have even known their name. And yet when I showed him the scan, he smiled again. "Where? I told you," he said. "You weren't supposed to look." Then he returned to tracing the room. Same direction, same pattern, same silence. He's not eating, not sleeping, not screaming. He's just remembering. And maybe he's not the only one. Chapter 7. The judge has not returned. 3 days. That's how long it had been since the hearing, since that footage was played, since anyone saw Judge H in person. And the strange part, no one said the word missing. They just stopped scheduling him. As court administrator, I've dealt with judges calling out sick, stepping aside for conflicts of interest, even resigning without notice, but I've never seen a case vanish into this much air. I logged in that morning expecting the usual follow-up docket, maybe a request for an extension or a status report from Chambers. Instead, my screen blinked with a rare designation across the top in bold red letters. Case study, procedural reassessment. I had to search our internal judiciary index to remember what that even meant. It's a classification reserved for extreme circumstances, usually when a judge is no longer psychologically fit to preside, but not legally incapacitated. In other words, when the court system wants to quietly remove someone without drawing attention to why. The case title was still there, but reduced to just initials. No hearing date, no pending motions, no trial continuation request, just a hovering, red-flagged limbo. I walked the file to the chief clerk's office myself. He looked at it for about 4 seconds, then leaned back and sighed, like he'd been holding something in for days. "Seal the judge's office," he said. "No entry without federal override." That's it. Not even an explanation. No notice to counsel, no attempt to transfer the session to another division. By afternoon, a new judge arrived. Younger, fresh appointment not even through their first year of trials. He walked in with the kind of formality that masked nerves. His first question wasn't about scheduling, wasn't about the jury. He simply asked, "Can I review Exhibit 6A?" He told them no. The order had come from above even the courthouse's administrative body. Exhibit 6A was now classified under a non-circulating visual materials seal. Only those who had already viewed it were permitted to reference it. He looked puzzled for a moment, then asked again, "Was there a verdict?" I paused, then answered, "No, just the footage." He said nothing, just sat in the judge's antechamber for a long while, staring at the sealed docket on his tablet, like he was reading a book with half the pages missing. Meanwhile, upstairs, the maintenance staff had begun clearing the old judge's chambers. Most of his personal belongings were already gone, removed quietly the night after the hearing. But one of the janitors came to me around 6 p.m., holding something wrapped in brown paper and plastic gloves. "I didn't put this in Lost and Found," he said. "Didn't feel right." He handed me a velvet scrap, thick, stained in one corner, burgundy with gold thread fraying at the edges. It wasn't from a robe, not court-issued. I knew what it was before I unfolded it fully. It was from the velvet chair, the one from 3B. Tucked inside the fabric was a small white note card, curled with damp and heat. On the front, printed in soft gray letters, "For those who watched." On the back, in blue pen, a message. It wasn't the acts, it was the rehearsal. I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't file it, didn't record it. I slipped it into the folds of my daily ledger and walked back to my desk. That night, after hours, as I locked up the clerk's office and started walking to the garage, my phone rang. Unknown number. I hesitated, answered. Silence. A voice. High, quiet, a child's. I saw it again, it said. It's playing in the mirror. Before I could respond, the line clicked dead. I checked the call history. The number was listed as disconnected. Since 2016. I stood there in the dark hallway for a long time, the overhead fluorescence humming like static. Then I looked up, toward the small square mirror mounted in the corner above the fire exit. For the first time in my life, I felt afraid to see myself looking back. Do not play again. Weeks passed. No trial resumed. No verdict was announced. No transcript ever finalized. Officially, the case was listed under a dead status. Indeterminate, sealed. Inside the Federal Archives' redacted transcript vault, the file sits in a black sleeve with no barcode, no file index. The name Combs, S, isn't even typed. It's written in pencil, faint, almost erased, and crossed through with a single line that never touches the letters. No jurors were recalled. No panel was reconvened. Diddy remains locked in the Special Housing Unit of MDC Brooklyn, unresponsive, unmoved. Days stretch on without sound, without complaint. No outbursts, no requests, just stillness. But the file didn't die. Not really. The loop began circulating a few days after the reassignment notice came down. Quietly, unofficially, someone, no one admits who, extracted the audio bed from Exhibit 6A. Not the footage, just the sound. It wasn't screaming, it wasn't words, just a hum. A low, rhythmic rise and fall. At first, it seemed like ambient noise, the hiss of analog tape, maybe a faraway engine. But when run through spectral analysis, the frequency wave showed something else. Not a wave, a name. The shape of it, drawn out in decibels and silence. The name belonged to a plaintiff in a sealed civil suit that was dismissed before it reached deposition. That plaintiff had been 13 at the time. They disappeared from the system 5 years ago. No forwarding address, no public record. But their name is in the hum now. And the hum is spreading. It's been whispered through encrypted case forums, passed between legal assistants and federal clerks as a curiosity. Listen to this weird sound file. Tell me what you hear. And every person who's listened to it reports the same feeling afterward. Not fear. Not disgust. Recognition. In the federal building downtown, on the 3rd floor, restroom 3C, a janitor finds a crack running down the side of the wall mount mirror. The cleaning crew says it wasn't there the day before. No record of any incident. No reports of damage. But on the sink beneath it, a USB drive is sitting alone. No label. No casing. Just metal and plastic. No one claims it. No one logs it. But someone plugs it in. Inside is a single file. No extension. No folder structure. Just a title burned into the drive partition itself. Do not play again. It doesn't matter. Someone plays it. No one knows who. The next morning, another judge is reassigned, quietly. No press release. Just an internal memo, unavailable for court proceedings until further notice. The docket under their name is frozen. The cases are rerouted. And back in Courtroom 3B, the one listed as inactive on every current floor map, the velvet chair, is gone. No request for removal. No record of transfer. Just absence. Where it sat, there's now only dust, facial impression, and one perfect circle in the carpet, undisturbed.